Hi everyone and welcome to Johnny How To. So today we're going to be taking a look at some old Shake tutorial media, but doing so with inside of Nuke. Now what we have basically is one still image of a grate that we're going to have a fan behind. And you see that once I'm playing this back, it's not animated. If I double click on the file, you can see it's just one frame. So it's basically just going to hold that frame throughout the entire sequence. And then if I go ahead and double click on this guy, I can see that this is from frame 1 to 5, so 4 frames overall. And if I go ahead and press 1 to view that and play him back, you can see it just kind of has an animated loop. It leaves off where it starts and then just continues on from there. Now I'm going to go ahead and make my frame range about 75 frames long. So I'm going to adjust my project settings just to get started here. And notice that the resolution of this comp is 400 by 300. That's for both elements. So 400 by 300. So I'm going to press S down in the node graph here for settings. I'm going to go ahead and change my full size format down to that. And since it's not a default regular format, it's going to be at the bottom under 400 by 300. I know this is a little bit off screen in the screen capture, but trust me, it is down there. It won't have a name, but it just says 400 by 300. So once I select that, anything I create from here on out inside of Nuke is all going to be at the resolution that I set my project to, which is now 400 by 300. So let's go ahead and put these two elements together. This is the foreground image. If I go and go through the channels, I can either use the drop down and go through the channels, or I can go ahead and just press RGBA, and mainly I'm looking, okay, does this have an alpha channel? Which it does, so it's going to be see-through in the black area. If I choose this guy, the fan, if I get RGBA, it does have transparency outside of the fan blades itself. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this guy over this guy, and I did that just by selecting my foreground image that I want to be the A input and just pressed M for merge. That automatically connected it to the A input. And then I go ahead and just drag my B input, or B for background, into my B input there. And I'm not seeing my composite yet because I need to go ahead and select the merge and press 1 to load it into the viewer. So now if I go ahead and press play, I can see that I have this animating behind this kind of grate or this shielding here. Now I want this project overall to be about 75 frames. So I'm going to go back to my project settings for 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and I can do this scroll down here, or I could press S for settings again to bring them up. And under frame range, I'm going to change this from 1 to 5 instead to about 70, 75 frames, something like that, just so we have a little bit more time to work with. Now remember, our source image sequence of the fan is only 5 frames long. So when I press play, it stops after 5 frames. Not really what I want. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is from the drop down here, I'm going to go ahead and choose loop from the drop down here. And what that does is going to say, okay, I just want to keep looping after the frame range is stopped. And you can see that it's going to just keep going. Now I could do some different things that I don't want to. I could have it bounce. So every 5 frames it's going back and forth. Now I have a malfunctioning fan here. But so in this case, I want to go ahead and just have it loop. And I have this going the entire time. All right, so that's the very basic composite on the elements that are actually given to us. Let's go ahead and work on setting up what we want to have. Some volumetric light rays coming out. We're going to have some fog coming in the front as well, and kind of give it a nice, cool, moody kind of feeling as well. So start off with, let's go ahead and create a ramp. I'm sorry, actually, so a ramp looks like this. It's a gradient, basically, in After Effects. We're going to change that from a ramp to a radial. And what radial gives us is the circular version. All right, so let's go ahead and want to put this and comp this behind our fan right here. So it looks like there's a light shining from behind that. So we can do that a couple ways. The easiest way would probably be go ahead and work from back to front. So what's our very back element of the two that we were starting with? Well, it's probably this fan element because that's behind this guy. So this is behind of that. And our radial, or our light in this case, what it's serving as, is going to be behind that even more. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this. So I'll press M for merge when I have my fan selected. So this is going to be A above, this is going to be B below. If I view this, now it looks like that's behind that. I'm going to keep just my B input floating down here. So I'm going to press spacebar to make my node graph full screen so I have a little bit more room to work. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself plenty of room since we're going to be branching off here. And let's go ahead and see what we have so far. So we have our radial, we have our fan, and then we have our grate. So the radial, as far as how I want it to be set up, isn't really there quite yet. So I'm going to go ahead and just adjust the size, till it's kind of filling the area that I want. And you can adjust in the color section, you can adjust the color directly here. I'm going to do that another way with a node. You can also adjust the opacity and some other areas like that. So the softness, how gradual of a transition do you want it to make. So you can do some really cool stuff. You can also check this perceptually linear, which is going to adjust how it looks as well. And basically you just want to kind of get it to where you have a somewhat strong center and then it's falling off as it goes further out towards the edges of this circle right here. And we can always adjust this more later on. So I'm going to go ahead and give this more of a greenish tint, I think, going for like a sewer vent or something like that. You could change the color here. I'm just going to use a grade node, so I'm going to select the radial and press G for grade. And in here, I'm going to go ahead under my multiply option. I'm going to click on the color wheel. I'm just going to drag this towards green. And I'm going to give this a little bit more of like a what you would kind of consider a sewer greenish yellow, and we'll go with that as our starting point. We might tweak this as we're going along. Yeah, we'll go with that. So let's go ahead and start off just trying to get those rays in our composition. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a node called volume rays. And just so we're not using tab all the time, you can go ahead and go under, I believe it's this guy right here. And if we go down near the bottom, we have volume rays. You can see it's kind of rays streaking out from what you would think from a sun or something like that. You also have God rays, but in this case we use volume rays. So I'll go ahead and add that to my comp. And right now it's not hooked to anything. I'm going to go and hook it into my image. I'll just do it from this comp right here at this point. Or maybe I'll just do it at the bottom just to take a look at what this is actually doing. So remember, every time I want to view node, select it and press 1. So go and plug the image input into my composition thus far. I'll press 1 to view it. And already I'm getting some funky stuff. Okay, what's going on here? So, well, first off, what we're actually viewing, or where the rays are going to be coming from, is from this volume position. So as I move this over here, you can see here's where the rays are actually coming from. So you can see we're actually getting some pretty cool rays. And if I play this back, they are actually being affected by the moving of the fan here. Now they're not animating at all aside from being affected by the rays. You can kind of see we're already getting a pretty cool result here. So if we go ahead and merge this as part of our composition, so I'm going to branch this off just to the side here a little bit. I'm going to select this and press M for merge. I'm going to go and put this on top of my result here. So I'll go ahead and call this, since it's good to name our nodes. So I'll go and double click this guy. I'll click on node and then under label, I'll say rays on. Something to let me know that I'm putting my volume rays on there. All right, so let's go ahead and see what we've got. So we've gone from here to here. And I can always adjust this position later on. And let's maybe tweak a few of these settings for our volume rays. So I'll double click on this. We have plenty of options. First off, the ray length is maybe a little bit too high. So I'm going to go in and down this. You can see that's how far the rays are going to come out. So I want it to be glowing, but I still want to get a little bit of sense of the fall off there. And also, if you find the quality breaking down, so if I view the rays by themselves and you start to see them jagged or kind of noisy, you can always adjust the quality here. If I put on low, you can kind of see what I mean. Low, you can kind of see the stepping. If I put on medium, if I put it on high, you start to get smoother and smoother. Now, since I'm only working in 400 by 300, I think medium's probably going to be fine. We can always adjust that later on if we need to. Okay, so as it is, we're already kind of moving along here. We have our volume rays that are being projected out and being occluded by the fan itself, and we have the fan looped and moving throughout the entire sequence that we want right now. Let's go ahead and try and refine this a little bit. So if we have such an intense light behind here, and in fact I might want to make this light a little bit more intense. So I'm going to go ahead and in my radial, in my grade where I was adjusting the color, I'll go and just add another grade so I have this separate. So I'll call this first grade overall color, and I will call this second grade, call this intensity. And what I'm wanting to adjust here is just how strong this light is back here. So I want to give it a little bit more of a dramatic look here. And again, this is all to taste, of course. When you're working with this, feel free to make it look and adjust it to your liking. Now, so we do have, through the volumetric rays, a pretty cool, already kind of built-in look of a little bit of light wrap because it's streaming through and over, but we don't actually have wrap going around it and around the vent right here. And so in some other video, I'm probably going to go through the homemade method where you can make your own light wrap and adjust it. But in this case, I think for now, just for the sake of time, and since we're not wanting to focus on it too much, we're going to go ahead and use the light wrap node that's built into Nuke, which is very appropriately named light wrap. So if I press tab and start to type the word light wrap and select it, here's our light wrap node. And basically the A input is what you want to have wrapped, and B input it's where it's being wrapped from. So let's go ahead and do this from a little bit more simple of a standpoint within our comp. So we have these guys right here. We don't have our volumetric rays on yet. Let's go ahead and say we want this to receive the wrap, and we want it to receive the wrap from this guy right here. And if we go ahead and view this, and we need to adjust our intensity and our diffuse, you can kind of see how it's wrapping around those areas. So diffuse, the higher that goes, the further it's going to go out, which we don't want that to be too intense or too far. We just want it to be localized around the blade right here. So if I go and move this down just a bit so we can see this a little bit more. So here's our intensity. How intense it is, how much it's going to bleed over, and then this is how far it's going to go throughout that. So that's working well for the blade itself, not so much for the actual edge and circle right here. So let's go ahead and see what we're working with. So this is our overall area. This is what we're working with. We have our light wrap. Well, let's go ahead and merge it on top and see how it looks as part of our comp. So I'll select the light wrap, and I'm going to go ahead and say generate wrap only. And that makes it a little bit easier to visualize what we're getting. So we actually are getting some wrap around the edge here. It's just because the most intense part of the radial is in the center here that it's getting more wrap, or more noticeable wrap, right around there. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this on my composition. So M for merge is going to be on top. And now if I go and view this, here's before and here's after. So we're just kind of getting a little bit more of a wrap on top there. So definitely making a difference and giving us more of a look of what we want. All right, and we can always adjust that at any point in time, so we can have the diffuse go out further. We can always have the intensities more stronger in general. For now, maybe leave it somewhere around there and kind of go on from there. All right, so let's go ahead and view our composition so far. I'm going to go ahead and just play this back. Not looking too bad. I mean, this is probably a lot stronger of rays that I would typically have, but for an example, it's fun to kind of pump it up a little bit more. Let's go ahead and try and have a little bit of jitter to that light behind there, like things are shaking a little bit. We can make it to where the blade was shaking, but I don't want to mess up the alignment of these two elements, the grate and then the fan itself. So let's go ahead instead, in this case, let's go ahead and have the actual light rays actually being what is moving around. So one way you can do that, and I think you've probably noticed, is how you adjust the volume position is where the rays are going to be emanating from. So if I move it down here, it's going to look like the streaking that way, streaking that way. You usually want to place it where your light source is kind of coming from, but you can give it a little bit of directional help based on how you do that. So in this case, I want to have that jittering a little bit. And before I get too far into that, let's go ahead and do an isolated example. I'm going to make a constant, which is just like a solid in After Effects. I'm going to view that. Right now it's just black. I'm going to change that color just to, well, somewhat of a gray, just so I can see what's going on. I'm going to add a transform node. So I'm going to select this constant, press T for transform, and I can always keyframe my movement. I could always keyframe the center point that we have in our volume rays. So if I go and view this, you can see that our volume volumetric center is right here. You can always keyframe that and try and give it a little bit of jitter manually. But let's go ahead and try and use some really light expressions to kind of help us along with this. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we have our transform. And if I go ahead and up my translate X, it's going to move to the right. If I have a positive number, of course, negative is going to left. And same thing goes for my Y up and down. Now we're going to use really basic expressions, and it's not something you have to memorize because they are available online. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pull up just Google real quick here. I'm going to do Nuke wave expressions, and one that pops up right here. It's really, really easy, and the person gives examples. And let's just do something that's a little bit of undulating, kind of like this. We could do a little bit irregular like this, I guess, as well. But so they have the full formula that explains what this does. So you can see you're naming your max value, your minimum value, and plus an offset and things like that. But they give you a quick way to do it as well. Now, I might do this even a little bit more simply, but let's go and just start off with this and see how it does. So if I go ahead and copy and paste this, and we might end up using something else. Go and start off with this though. If I go ahead and click on this little curve right here and say edit expression, which also is the equal sign on the keyboard to bring it up, I can go ahead and paste this in here. And you can see the result I'm getting is 0.3488. It's going to be the same if I do them for both. What does that actually mean? Well, it means it's going to be moving it a really little teeny tiny amount. In fact, you're not even really seeing it right now aside from the little jitter of the crosshair. If I go to my curve editor, you can kind of see what it's actually doing. So it's moving it from about 0.8 pixels all the way down to 0 pixels. So the maximum amount it's getting moved, it looks like, is about 0.9 pixels. So it's only moving about 1 pixel overall. Now, you can adjust this very easily. So I'm going to go back to edit expressions by giving this an overall multiplication value. So right now it's dividing everything by 2. So if I take away this divided by 2, you can see this has actually gotten bigger. If I go ahead and multiply, which is a little asterisk, it's going to multiply everything inside of the parentheses by whatever number I put here. So if I say by 5, you can see if I go ahead and select my curve and press F for fit, here's my first curve. This is my Y curve right here. You can see I've multiplied this one, it's magnified it a lot. So now it's going to jitter basically between 7 pixels and 0 pixels. So you can see here's our high, and then here's our low, and it's going back up. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like if we have this in both of those sections. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the curve, edit expression, and I'll just copy and paste this down below as well. And now they're the same. Let's go and see what happens. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more of a movement. It's a little bit too slow for what I'd like it to be. But let's just go ahead and see without doing too much of this, how this looks. We might as well try it out before we make any decisions. So I'm going to go ahead and just press select and press equals here. I'm going to copy this expression. I'll go over into my volume raise. And since these are both using pixel values, I can kind of fit these in. But remember, this is the center point is 262. So I'm going to press equals here. This is my X value for the volumetric center, which is right here. If I press equals, if I just paste this in, the new value is 4.16. So I'm going to say I want to keep all this the same, then say plus 262. And just to keep my order of operations really clear to read, I'm going to put these in parentheses. So if you don't remember your order of operations, whatever's in parentheses happens first. So it's going to do all these calculations first and then add the 262 to it afterwards. So now I'm getting 262 basically plus the difference that I have in here, which gives me a value of 266.16 on this particular frame. I go ahead and click OK. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that. So I'm going to copy this first. I'll go in here and paste this here. Let's go in and see how this works. Oh, I need to undo that because this value was 168. So when I paste this in, instead of 262, I'll go ahead and say 168. So remember, the goal is, why I'm doing all this, I want to keep my volumetric position center basically in the same spot, but just have it move around a little bit. And if we go ahead and view our volume rays by themselves, I'll go ahead and shut down this transform right here. Hard to tell, but they are moving around a little bit. In fact, to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and stop the motion on my fan. So under expression, I'm going to say 1, and that means it's only going to animate frame 1. And I'll go ahead and view this again and just see what's happening. So you can see I am getting a little bit of a jitter, not a huge amount, but I can always tweak this to be faster, slower, more offset, less offset, whatever you want it to be. So not a huge difference, but just a little bit of variation. And I can always magnify that more as well. So just for the sake of example, let's go ahead and go back and I'll go say edit expression. And let's go ahead and say times 15 and then times 15. Okay, we go and press play. You can see it's moving where it's allowed to move, it's moving more. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our final comp again and see how this looks. So that's animating. So let's go ahead and turn back on our fan. So we'll just take off this frame expression, which holds it at that particular frame. Let's make it blank. And we'll go ahead and go back to our comp. We'll go ahead and play it back. Now I have a little bit of undulation. We're not able to notice it too greatly in the comp. We do have it undulating the center point a little bit. And then we have our raise and the fan running. All right, so not too bad so far. I'm just going to try and make the light a little bit more fun to take a look at. I'm going to add grain to both the volumetric raise and the radial. So I'll go ahead and add grain to these guys. I'm going to make them different types of grains. So I'm going to go ahead and give this, I think the third preset's a little bit lighter. Let's go ahead and try that. Yeah, a little bit heavy. We can always down that if we need to. Yeah, let's go ahead and down that maybe a little bit. So intensity, let's go ahead and down. It looks like our blue is the main one, down a little bit. Okay. Let's go and play that. All right. And let's go ahead and one last element to this, just for the sake of trying to make it look as good as we can. And this last little section is going to be a little bit of fog. So I'm going to go ahead and make some noise. I go ahead and view in and zoom this. So if I adjust my Z, this kind of animates it. It makes it look like it's animating. And then my X and Y is going to be the actual size. So this is going to be really, really noticeable sections. And this is going to be like kind of more zoomed in or bigger view of the fog. So I'll go ahead and do something maybe something like that. I'm going to go ahead and merge this over my composition as a whole. I don't like that it's not really see-through right now, so I'm going to go ahead and I can either adjust the opacity of this in my immersion. Well, first I can go ahead and set this to screen or something like that. It's going to overlay a little bit differently. In this case, it didn't make a huge difference, but I can use my mix dial to make it more or less on there. But if I don't want to accidentally forget that I adjusted in there, I can always select my noise, use a multiply and choose multiply math. And this is kind of a way that you can adjust your opacity as well. So the value is going up and down how much it's on there as well. So I want it on there just a little bit. And I'll go ahead and add a grade node, just G for grade. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the color of that to try and match my scene a little bit better. And so there we go, a little bit more in line with it. I don't like that it's a little bit too intense. I could adjust the saturation here. I'm just going to go ahead and add a separate saturation node. And just kind of make this a little bit less intense on there. Now, last little touch we'll do is we'll have this animate a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do T for transform, which is our movement tool. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger because I want to be able to move it from one side to the other. And so at frame 1, I'm going to keyframe this at this current translation. So I'll say on the curve, select it and say set key. So I have a keyframe here, this little blue marker right here. And at the end of this composition, I'm going to have it moving pretty slowly. I'm just going to move it a little bit, maybe about halfway. And if I go ahead and play this back, and you can see I have another keyframe right here. So if I go and play this back, I'll close these guys down so I can see it nice and clear. So we kind of have this fog moving across, but it's static. It's not really animating. So that's where in the noise, the Z parameter comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and at frame 1, set this to its current value of 1.7. And at the end, I'll go ahead and have it just animated a little bit. Not much. I just want to have a subtle sense of it animating. I can always change it if I need to. There we go. So now we have this fog coming across, but it's also not staying the same the entire time either. It's actually animating a little bit. We could do some more fun things to this, like try and have it to where the rays are hitting the fog, it lights up a little bit brighter and things like that. I think the grain on there is a little bit too intense, but I don't want this video to go too far. But hopefully you can see how we can really get some cool effects pretty quickly in doing this inside of Nuke. Now, the one last thing I'm going to do is I don't really like how the noise is so solid. There's not really any separation. So I'm going to go ahead, before I put this on the background, I'm going to undo my, let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and add one more grade. I should have named these. So this is my green. So I'll go ahead and name this green. This is my opacity, so I'll go and double click on this. I'll call this opacity. There we go. So I know what that does. I know what that does. And last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and adjust one more section just for the contrast of the fog or the clouds or whatever you want to call it. So I'll go ahead and say this is the contrast. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and gamma down or multiply up. That's going to add, if I do those in opposite directions, it's going to add more contrast. Meaning that the darker areas are going to be darker, the lighter areas are going to be lighter. And now I have a little bit more separation between the fog than I did before. So if I disable this, you can see it's just kind of an overall hazy fog, but now I have specific areas they're going to be animating across. So it lets me see the fog a little bit more easily because it's just not this overall fog on the whole scene. All right, everyone, so hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, there's a lot we could do to this shot to make it look more fun and better, but hopefully this gives you some idea on how you can get some very basic elements and then try and make it a lot more visually interesting and add a lot of elements with inside of Nuke itself. So with that, I'll see you on the next Johnny How To.